Today, we're going to make pie crust. Pie crust is the foundation for pie, and for a good pie, you've got to have a good pie crust. Welcome to Southern Glance with Gail. We're going to make a pie crust today, and in order to do this, we're going to do it in 4 steps. The first one is we're going to make the dough. Second one, we're going to knead the dough. Third, we're going to roll out the dough. And the fourth is decide whether you want an unbaked or a baked pie shell. And actually we're going to talk about the fourth one first, because whenever you're making a pie crust, you don't just decide you're going to do it. You have a purpose for it. What type of pie are you going to make? What recipe do you need? Is the recipe calling for a baked or an unbaked pie shell? So you start with the end in mind, which is that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to use a food processor for the first part, and then we're going to finish it up by hand. We're going to put in 2½ cups of flour. This is 1½ cups right here, but I wanted to show you how to measure the flour. So whenever you're measuring the flour, you don't ever shake the flour. You're going to overfill your container. This is 1 cup. So we're going to just overfill this, and then we're going to scrape it off. Don't ever shake flour, because then you have too much flour and it's going to make it harder. Okay, that looks good. So now we have 2½ cups of flour in here. We're going to add to that 1 teaspoon salt. This pie dough has 5 ingredients. We've already put in the flour, we've already put in the salt. Now we need to keep everything cold, because the coldness helps to have a flaky pie crust, and it's so good like that. The butter will melt if it's too warm, and it kind of gets everything soggy, and it's just not so good. So keep everything cold. I mean like freezer cold. So we have 6 tablespoons of butter. Let me show you what I've done. So I chopped up 6 tablespoons. I put it in the freezer. Then I chopped it up into chunks like this, and I still stuck it in the freezer, because you want to have small little chunks, because the food processor, it will be a lot less hard or a lot easier on the food processor if you just put it in chunks. Okay, so that's our 3rd ingredient. Now we have our 4th ingredient, and this is shortening. And again, we're going to kind of chop this up into chunks. We're going to chop this into chunks. And I did put this in the freezer just for about an hour or so. But you want to have everything cold. Now, as soon as we dump this in here, we are going to grind this, or we're going to pulse it, so that it makes it into kind of coarse crumbs. But we want it into chunks. That looks good right there. Let's get all of this. Okay, now let's go ahead and pulse this. Now we're going to go ahead and do the rest of it by hand. So we're going to take off our lid, and we're going to put this in a big, large bowl to work with. All right, we put all of our dough, and this is the first step. This is making the dough. This is especially for Jerry Lynn. We were talking up at church, and she had questions about pie dough, and about whether it's cracks and whether it is too doughy. So anyway, Jerry Lynn, I hope this helps you. Also, I appreciate sallysbakingaddiction.com, because she has some really good recipes, and this is actually one of her recipes that we're just doing because I really like it. Okay, so now you can see these crumbs, but now for the 5th ingredient, we're going to take our 1/2 cup, and we're going to fill it with water. Let me show you what you do with the water. You get a big container, a large container, and you fill it with ice, and then you put water on top of that and just let it sit for a little bit so the water is really cold. Because like I said, everything in here needs to be really cold. you want to have a flaky pie crust, and this helps to have that flaky pie crust. So now we're going to take this, we're going to pour it right in here, and that's our 1/2 cup. Okay, we're going to put this to the side, we're going to put a straw in it, and that's our drinking for later. Okay, so now when you add this 1/2 cup, you don't add it all at the same time, because if you do, you might get too much water. So we're going to add just a little bit, maybe a tablespoon, maybe a couple of tablespoons, and we're just going to kind of mix it around, just like this. And this is called a pastry blender. So in the links below, in the description part of it, I'm going to have the ingredients listed, and I'm also going to have links to some of the tools that I use with cooking. Like one of them will be this pastry blender. Okay, that's not quite enough. We're going to actually use up all of this 1/2 cup. Now, if you live in a high altitude place, or maybe winter, or someplace where it's really cold and very little moisture, you're going to maybe want to put a little bit more water in there because it's dry. If you live in a very humid place, then you might put a little bit less water, or you might still put the 1/2 cup, but if it gets too wet, then you could put in more flour to make it just the right consistency. So right here, we're going to go ahead and use the 1/2 cup. I've made this so many times that I know that that's what it takes. So we're going to continue doing this until just about 1 tablespoon at a time, until all of the 1/2 cup is mixed in here. And so we'll kind of speed up the video for this part. Okay, we're finished adding the water. We're finished mixing the dough. That's the first step. Second step is we're going to knead the dough. Okay, we are ready for kneading the dough, which is the second step. We have here a mat. This is a really nice mat. Let me show you what it looks like. So it kind of sticks to the countertop, and it has circles, and it has temperature, Fahrenheit and Celsius, and it has inches and centimeters. So the circles are for pies. You can actually put your pie in there, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to roll it out depending on the circles. But right now we're just going to knead our dough. So what I do, I like using parchment paper on top of this because you can still see through it. So we're going to put down a dusting of flour. And this dusting is not going to cover everything. It's just like a dusting. But if we need more, we can put more. But we don't want to add too much more flour to our dough because we've already done that. But we don't want it to stick. Now, here's what our dough looks like. We're going to just dump it out. Now we've got our dough on our parchment paper. We're going to knead the dough. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to put our hands underneath the dough. We're going to raise it up and just put it right on top of itself and flatten it out. Very gentle. Don't use too much force because dough is gentle. And we're just going to keep on doing that. Lift it from behind and raise it forward. Lift it from behind and lift it up and on top of itself. And before long, whenever we keep doing this, we're going to mash it down just a little bit. And you can see that it's transforming right like that. It's not quite where we need to be, so we're going to keep on kneading it just a little bit. It only takes just a few seconds. You know, it's probably less than a minute. It might be about a minute or so, but I don't think it's that much longer than that. So we're just going to, and you just keep on turning the dough around, gently patting it, raising it, getting it from underneath, raising it up and on top of itself. Now you can see that it's really starting to look good. Okay, I think that's probably about it. So I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to do the last part of this just by hand. And see, you can see that it looks really good. I also see little flakes of butter. That's fine and dandy. But we're going to kind of make it into a log. Kind of like that. And now I'm going to cut it in half. The way I cut it in half is I'm just going to pinch it I'm just going to eyeball it, pinch it, and pull. And this probably has a little bit more than this one, so I'm going to just add that to it. Okay, and so now the next step is that we're going to wrap this up and put it in the refrigerator for 2 hours at least. You can put it in the refrigerator or you can even put it in the freezer. If you put it in the freezer, get it out the night before into the refrigerator and let it set in the refrigerator overnight. And then you can take it out at room temperature and then roll it out. Take it out at room temperature for about 10 minutes or so and then roll it out. Okay, we're going to slide this off. And we're going to just put our circle right there and we're going to just cover it. And then that's ready for the refrigerator. Let's get one more. And I've got kind of a long piece because I'm going to show you how you can also freeze part of the other one too. Anyway, this is a cool slider. One of those tools that makes handling plastic wrap very, very nice. Okay, now that we have done this part, like I said, we're going to let that go into the refrigerator for about 2 hours or overnight. It can stay in the refrigerator 2-3 days, I guess. But then you need to go ahead and use it, whatever you need to do. Okay, so I actually have some pie dough in the refrigerator and we're going to be ready to roll it out. That's our third step. All right, what I would suggest, we're ready to roll, but this is that same parchment paper that we used to knead the dough. I'm going to just go ahead and clean that and use the same parchment paper. I don't want to leave that flour there because it might have chunks of the dough there, and I don't want that. I want a clean surface whenever I do anything like this. Okay, we are back, and now we're ready to do our third step, which is roll out the pie dough. So we have gotten one of our pie doughs that I actually made earlier today. We're going to just put it right here. Whoops, I forgot to put a dusting of flour. Okay, so now we're going to put our pie dough right there. When we start rolling it out, just imagine, well, I put it in this center circle right here. Let me show you this. Okay, so we're going to use these circles right here. This is where we're going to put our pie dough. And then we're going to roll it out so that it's all the way out here because this is going to make a deep dish pie dough. This recipe actually makes 2 pie doughs, pie crust. So we're going to roll it out. Now my flour has all kind of shifted. Let's put it back in there just by patting it. Okay, we're going to put our pie crust right there. And now I want you to, even though it's not really a circle here, I want you to imagine that it's a clock. 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. And so we're going to start at those points and we're going to roll outwards. And then we're going to keep on rolling outwards in every direction. If this shifts, like if it starts getting over here, we could just pull the parchment paper right back. That's an advantage of using parchment paper. So if the dough also sticks to your rolling pin, just roll it in flour and kind of spread it around. So now we're going to rock it back and forth, but mine was sticking. So we're going to put some more flour on here. And we're just going to rock it back and forth just a little bit and then come off the edge. Just like that. And then we're going to go the other way. And we're actually going to go every different way that you can, but we're always starting in the middle. We are finished rolling out the pie crust. You can see the jagged edges and that's perfectly fine. You are not going to have a perfect circle. First thing is I'm going to show you how you can freeze this. Like if you wanted to go ahead and wrap it and roll it out because you're on a roll, you can put your parchment paper, just fold it over very gently And then just start rolling very, very carefully. All the way. Just like this. And then that plastic that you used to cover it with, you can actually use that. And you can wrap it in that plastic. So just put the plastic over here, tuck in the edges, and keep on rolling it. Just like that. Okay, you can go ahead and just wrap it up, and then you can stick it in the freezer just like this. But if you want to thaw it out and use it, you need to thaw it out the night before. Just put it in the refrigerator and then the night before, and then get it out the day that you want it, and then just use it like you can. But when you unwrap it, be very careful. I'm gonna go ahead and unwrap this for you. Okay, you see how the pie crust kind of sticks with the parchment? All you have to do is just kind of pull it apart very carefully, and it should come straight on out, just like this. Okay, so that's how you would freeze this, and then you would use it later. Now I'm going to show you how to put it in a pie plate. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of flour on here so that it won't stick. And we're going to just rub it around, because this helps it so that it kind of protects it from the pie plate itself, so that it's going to be easier to dish out. You want this flour, and it's like this. It's about that much. You don't want too much, but you want it all over the place. Okay? And you just want to kind of wrap it like that and kind of get it to the edges. Okay. Now, the key is to get it into the pie plate without tearing it up. So let me move the rolling pin. Okay. We're going to move this just a little bit, just so that you can see. Here is my dish, my pie plate that I have used, I bet, for 30 years at least, probably more like 35. So you can tell it. But my other one is in use, so I have to use this one. I'm going to show you with this. This is a deep dish. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the parchment paper and everything. And notice that I've got my pie plate right here on the other side of my parchment paper. And I'm just going to flip this very carefully. I've got my hand underneath. And I'm just going to flip it just like that. And so now I'm going to just very carefully take off the parchment paper. And as you can see, it's not quite centered. So very carefully, just kind of move, because it has flour in it, you can move that around. And now you've got a nice looking flour. You've got a nice looking pie crust or a pie shell right there. But now you've got some overhang. So what do you do with the overhang? Well, you can do a couple of things. Some people like to trim off this. I'm going to go ahead and trim off just a little bit. And you can use a knife if you want. But then they tuck the other part underneath, so that it's kind of nice, and it gives a little bit of an appearance like that. And that's really kind of cool to do. The other thing that you can do is just kind of, with your hands, just kind of mash it just like this. I think I'm going to go ahead and do this part. With your fingers, just kind of cut the pie dough against the edge of the pie plate. Okay, there we go. Now kind of smooth it out, make sure that there's nothing overhanging. Now we're ready for fancying up the edges. You can flute it by putting your finger underneath of it, and then with your other two, just kind of pushing it in like that. This works really well if you have a fluted side already. So you can go ahead and do the whole side like that, or you can do it with the fork method. The fork method, just dip your fork in flour just a little bit and come from the outside and rock it in and it leaves a little impression of the fork. Just do it once, because if you do it more than that, you might be getting too deep and it might cut it into the pie plate itself. Now that we are done with our pie, now what next? Okay, we've already made 3 of our steps in this video. We have made the dough, we have kneaded the dough, we've rolled out the dough. Now we're going to decide what we're going to do. So if your recipe calls for an unbaked pie shell, that's simple. You just go ahead and put your pie shell in here and put your filling in, and you're just going to be going ahead and cooking it like the directions say. So we're not going to go into that. But here's what we're going to really talk about, is what if you need a cooked pie shell? How do you do that? So we've got our pie shell, it's already done, but we do need to put some pie weights in there to cook it. We've got our oven set for 375, and now we're going to put parchment paper in here because we're going to be adding weights, pie weights. The reason we do this is because just think of a balloon, and whenever you blow up a balloon, it has air pockets in it. If you don't do something to your pie crust, it's going to have air pockets to it where it kind of blows up a little bit, and you're going to have bubbles all over the place. So you've got to protect your pie crust. So we're going to bake this. First of all, we're going to put parchment paper to protect the pie, and we're going to load in 2 containers of pie weights. Okay, so now that we've got our weights in there and our parchment paper, we're going to just go ahead and cook this, but we're going to also protect the edges of it. I don't think the edges will get done, but we're going to bake it for about 15 minutes at 375 degrees. If it starts getting too done around the edges, this is what I do. I take tin foil. This is shiny side. It does not matter whether it's shiny side or whatever, but I've got 5 strips. I'm going to put one and then another one right on top of it, and I'm just going to crimp the edges of it so that it stays, just like this. And I'm going to make a long strip, open it out, put another one right in here, and I'm going to crimp the edges so that it makes it very tight and secure. We're wanting to have a circle of tin foil. And then I'll show you what we're going to do with it. Now you can easily buy something, you can buy a protector, like a silicone protector. The problem is that sometimes the protectors don't always go around exactly the way that you want it to. I'll go ahead and put a link in the bottom, but this works just fine. So now I've got this long piece right here, and I'm going to just connect the edges, and this is 5 aluminum foils put together. Okay, so now I can go ahead and adjust that. See how big it is like this? I'm going to tuck it under and just kind of crimp the sides under. And then fold this on top of it. Very, very loosely. It doesn't even have to touch. But you do want it to kind of make sure that all the sides, all the rim is protected from the heat. Okay, kind of like that. But I don't think we will need that first of all. We're just going to bake it for 15 minutes at 375. We'll be back as soon as it's done. We have our pie crust out of the oven. We're going to take our pie weights out, and they're very hot. So just kind of very carefully get this. And we're going to just put it in another container. And as you can see, the pie still looks undone, uncooked right here. So now we're going to go ahead and finish cooking this. The way we're going to do it is we're going to take our fork and go ahead and punch holes all the way in here. And say that you want to make this for a coconut cream pie. Because the coconut cream pie cooks on the stove, you don't need to have it cooking in the oven except for the meringue. And so you just need to have your pie shell cooked all the way. If you want a pecan pie, then you would just use a unbaked pie crust, unbaked pie shell, and just dump it all in at the same time. Okay, we're going to put this back in the oven for about 5 minutes, or maybe just a little bit longer, just so that this little dampness is probably, it still feels a little bit damp, so we're going to make sure that it gets a little bit cooked. Okay, we are going to protect the edges because I don't want my edges to get any more done than that. So this is where we're going to put that tin foil right around here, protect the edges very loosely, and that way only the bottom part gets done now. Okay, and in the oven it goes for about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. Our pie crust has just come out of the oven. It was there for a little bit longer than 10 minutes, but as you notice that the middle of it looks a lot better. So now you're ready to put your pie filling in. You do need to read your directions on your recipe. To help prevent a soggy bottom, this is one thing that you can do, and it's called an egg wash. You can have the whole egg, you can have the egg white, you can have the egg yolk, you can have anything, the whole thing, but just mix it with some kind of liquid like either cream or milk or water. I just have 1 egg white, and I'm just going to be mixing that with 1 tablespoon water. Okay. Then you just stir it around, and this is called an egg wash. Also, I don't think I told you, but we just blind baked a pie. And that was what that was called, whenever you partially bake it and then you fully bake it after you take the pie weights out. That's called blind baking. Okay, so whenever you egg wash a pie, you just spread it out. You can use anything you want to kind of spread it out, but just spread it out all over. This makes it for a shiny pie if you want. It helps to prevent a soggy bottom. You can also put it around the sides. That concludes our pie crust recipe. I hope you enjoyed this video, and good luck with your pie crust. Thanks for watching. Please ring the bell. Please hit the like button. Whoops, no. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button, hit the bell, and